fresh from yesterday's success in starting the bike. I came out again today. It's the weekend now. It looks like rain, but we still haven't actually had a decent amount. We need some rain because our tanks are getting empty. Should be working on the Riley, but instead I'm working on the bike because I'm getting so close now. I might as well just keep going and finish it. And I'm still waiting for the metal for the Riley. But this morning the fuel level had dropped, but I don't think it's leaking from the carb at the moment. I think it's actually leaking around the fuel hose because that's just pushed on at the moment. This isn't even proper fuel hose, of course. It's just a bit of PVC. But I gave it a cold start, gave it choke, a little bit of throttle, a couple of little pumps on the tickler, and it pretty much started straight up. So I did have to do it with the throttle cracked a little bit. I think that's just going to take practice to get the right setting. But no, it fired up, ran fine. So I'm going to call all of that good now. I did start taking apart the wiring. I wanted to get the wiring loom out of there. This back bit was a real pain because the way everything's assembled, to get to the wiring up inside the tail, I had to take all of this off, the number plate holder. To get the number plate holder off, I had to take the number plate off. I had to take off the thing they're using to hold the licensing sticker that was on there. That meant I couldn't get to some of the other bolts. Just a pain in the neck. But I've taken all that apart. I will gently straighten some of this. A few dents and things are fine, but I think it's worth trying to get things looking a little bit straighter. This is the number plate. This is the original number plate. The numbers don't even follow this sort of sequence anymore, I believe, but it's still got its original number. It's still live in the system. These plates were thick back in the day. That's about, I'm not sure, 3-4 millimeters thick. Again, just give it a gentle straightening and a clean. I just want the dirt off it. I did take the seat off. This is a more recent thing someone's done, obviously. Just some vinyl that's been sewed up and an extra piece of foam that was on top of there, wasn't even glued. That might be the original foam. I doubt it. Not really sure. So not sure what I'll do there. I'll probably just clean it up, put it back. This has obviously been dinged in the past. It's been repaired. You can see where someone's painted rust killer on it. Again, this will all just get a gentle clean. This I do need to weld because that it will crack. These I'd like to remove and just straighten. It's just I think it's aluminium for the rear shock adjustment. They call them shocks. They're not really shocks. It's just springs. There's no real damping on them. The wiring is a real mess, and things like the grommets will need replacing. You can see that's gone absolutely rock hard. It's just going to break. Yeah, the wiring is all over the place. In some places the wiring was done in such a way that it looped through things. So even with everything disconnected, you couldn't just disconnect the wires. Whenever you see speaker cable in an automotive situation and it's not for the sound system, you need to worry. So this went into the headlamp housing, and that's just literally pushed on, and that's just a bullet that pushes into a little brass clip. So there was not actually anything holding this in place. So that was a bit of a bodge. You can see there's bits of electrical tape, there's fuses that have been spliced in, there's bits of the original wiring, but it's in such poor condition. Like this is absolutely cooked. It's just gone brittle. Stuff like this, where it's just literally cracking off, just cracking apart. So I'm not going to reuse any of that. That is the proper rectifier. So that is I can't remember who makes them, but that should actually be usable. I'm definitely going to put it back, but I'll probably do it with the modern regulated rectifier, as I mentioned. The switch is an addition. I think somebody's added that in, I guess. Looking at the switch, yeah, the way it's wired. But I'll put that back because a complete battery isolator is a good idea. Hopefully now I can get the front forks off. This is the wiring for the horn button, which is just that light green wire. That seems to be the ground, which doesn't seem very thick. And then I believe these other three are for the headlamp. And again, it's just got these little push terminals. They're not soldered. I don't think they're even crimped. So I'll have to have a look at those. But yeah, I need to get the front forks off. And then I think the rest of the body, then I can flip the body upside down. I just want to clean the inside of it. It's covered in mud and grime. I may end up coating the inside of it with something, maybe some of that black sound deadening stuff, just to help keep it cleaner and stop it rusting in future. But I'll see what state it's in once I get it apart. Front wheel, that all needs redoing, of course. Front brakes, front hubs, replace the tyre, clean up the rim, same as the rear. That cleaned up reasonably well. I mean, it still looks old and it's got rust and stuff on it, but that's okay. And I want to check the bearings in the steering, and I will clean and regrease the front forks. And that's probably all I really need to do. And I'll probably rebush these, because that just kind of makes it unpleasant. Same on this side. This is completely jammed up. I did have to cut the clutch cable to even get it apart. Hand grips are fine. The switch should be fine. I'll just redo the cabling to it. And yeah, just get the dirt off, but leave the rest, and then probably penetrol, something like that, or wax just over the surface, just to stop it getting worse. I think that should do it. I'm not going to try and replace that rubber seal. I'll leave that how it is. So really there shouldn't be too much more to do. This does need cleaning up and straightening. It's completely mangled, but I should be able to hammer it back into some sort of semblance of usability. You can see all the grime on it. I will need to take the switch apart and give it a good clean, but as far as I can tell, it's all there and it should all work. You can't read what it says on the top. It's almost like it's been melted a bit, but I think the actual switch itself should be relatively robust, which would be good because these are apparently really hard to get. Oh, and the head gaskets, I think I put it in the comments. It does actually mention in the period parts book that they aren't symmetrical, and I think it said it's 3/32 offset to one side. So the original manuals mention it. The modern club tech notes don't mention it explicitly, but they do say check the alignment. So I think it was just me not paying enough attention, and I suspect even if you get it wrong, usually I imagine it's probably okay, and it may just been the tolerances on this that meant it just pinched it, and that was enough to stop it working. When I drain and refill the coolant, I will take that near side head off and check which way up I've got the gasket and fix that if I need to. It'll be interesting to see. This is a bit annoying, trying to get the bars off. There is not much space around these nuts. You can see there's this bracket that holds them. The only socket I could find that will fit is actually a spark plug socket, because it's got thin walls and I can actually get in there to get that bolt undone, that nut undone. I don't have any sockets or even tube sockets that are narrow enough to get in there. I don't know if that's been bent, doesn't look like it. It's sort of welded on, but hopefully now I can get the bars off. And then front forks, I think, is just getting this off. Can't remember what's under there exactly, but then you can sort of drop them down or lift the body off. So, and there's the remains of the wiring loom. I'm at the my bike's exploded stage. Front end is off, front forks are off. I haven't dismantled them yet. Good news is the front brakes look good, or at least the brake shoes. I'll just sand the faces of those just to get rid of any glazing. That should all clean up nicely. The front bearings seem fine, but I would like to get in there and give them a clean and repack. Don't think that's too tricky. I can't remember exactly how to do it. I'll have to look in the book. This is the underside of the body, which is in pretty good condition, but just needs a good clean, I think. Same on the inside. You can see the years of gunk in there. A few dings and bashes. You can see the cracking. That's very common around the seat. That's why there's that plate on the top. Somebody's repaired that. The steering, I haven't cleaned these properly yet, but I mean the grease is really old, but they seem okay. These are just plain bearings, so there's just loose ball bearings in there. I think I've lost one. It'll be on the floor somewhere. Even though I knew that was going to happen, I still managed to lose one. But the races look okay from what I can see. The bearings themselves, they look okay, and they're a standard size. I'm pretty sure they're just 1/4 inch, and I'm sure I've got some of those somewhere, so replacing one of them isn't a big deal. This just needs a clean. I can't remember how the shocks come apart, but I will basically take those apart, clean them, and re-oil them. They use the same oil as, I can't remember if it's the same as the engine oil or the gearbox oil, but there's just a little bit of oil in them. They seem all right. Again, years and years of grime. We'll just get the grime off it, I think. I've removed the old front tyre, but in order to get the bearings out, I need to remove the locking ring. And these things are pretty tight, so I think I'm actually going to make a tool to do that. I did try hitting it with a brass drift, and even that's enough to mangle the metal a little bit, so I stopped that pretty quickly. So I think I'll have to machine up a tool, but I might do that later. So instead I'm cleaning up the front forks. They seem pretty good. What you do to take these apart, and this is how the manual says to do it, there's a bush that's in the top of this tube. It's a push fit. So what you do is you put the fork in a vise like this, and it says telescope it out, effectively using this as a hammer to knock the bush up. So you pull it out like that. You have to do it quite a bit, like pull it down, and slowly this top bush will come out. And that's basically the front fork. It's just a hollow tube. There's this bush here, there's a clip on the end. I'm not going to remove any of that. I'm just going to clean this up, put it back together. That was the oil that was inside there. Pretty manky. So these should clean up nicely. The outside, all I've done is put it through the parts washer and used a stiff brush on it. Any dirt that doesn't come off easily, I'm just going to leave there. It's just part of the patina of the bike. A few more little bits and pieces. I've straightened up a bit. This top cover, this was all mangled. It's still all mangled, but it's not quite as mangled as before. Something going on with the ammeter. The needle gets stuck. So I may need to open that up and give that a clean. The actual switch part is really solidly made, and that'll be absolutely fine. That works fine. Given it a good clean, I'll give it a clean with some electrical cleaner. Unfortunately, the actual knob broke when I was trying to get that off. It's pinned in place, and it's really hard to get the little pin out. I did try drilling it, went up as far as I could with the drills, and then tried tapping it out, and it's so brittle it just snaps. But you can see that pin is kind of offset. So the way it works is the knob goes on there, the pin locks it to the shaft, but without the key joins the shaft to the knob so that the whole thing will turn. There's no teeth or anything on the key. It's just, I mean, you could turn that with a screwdriver pretty much. And I don't know if it was because the top plate was bent or if this was bent. This looks like it's been heated up and melted a bit. So it was all warped. So to fix that, I drilled this block of wood and sort of fitted this into the wood. And you could see it was bowed. It had quite a sort of curve to it. So I poured boiling water over it and then basically brought it to my press. And I didn't press it, I just used the press to put a tiny amount of pressure just to hold it flat till it cooled down, and that has flattened it out quite nicely. But it definitely looks like it's been melted before. Something's happened to it. But you can read it almost now, so the actual positions, I think that's cracked as well. Pilot, head, ignition, off. That one, I'm not sure. I think that's like emergency ignition. And then there's a park position. So it's a 6-position switch. The knobs, I'm pretty sure you can get from the spares. So I can fix that. And the switch, like I say, should be fine. This has got little notches in it where it fits in. So like that. Giving this a bit of a clean. Again, I didn't polish it or anything, just got the worst of the dirt off. And the front forks are going back together. The problem with them is getting this bush back in. So that bush pushes into here. It's all just a friction fit. The only thing that actually holds these two halves together, apart from the friction, is the spring twists and locks into these seats. And when you reinstall the front forks, you actually install them on an angle with a slight twist to each one, so that when you put the bolt through for the axle, it twists them back and it locks them onto the springs, which seems a bit strange. There's a service tool for doing this properly, which is like a split collar, which will be metal. I thought, well, let's just try 3D printing one. So I just 3D printed it from solid PLA. It's split, obviously, with the cable tie holding the two halves together. And then you basically do the opposite to getting it undone. You hold it by the top here and you whack it down onto this block of wood. That's why that's all dented. And that sort of drives that bush home. So if this has worked, I should be able to remove this. I'll see if I can do it without cutting it. I need a pointy thing to go in there. And then I should be able to twist the spring and get it back into place. I will lightly grease the spring. It's already lightly oiled itself when I was trying to get it home. There's a little hole up here, which is where the air comes out, and a little bit of oil has come out of that. It is engine oil that you fill it with. It's SA 30 or equivalent, and it's 1/8 of a pint. You just pour it into the bottom here and then reassemble it. And think that's everything. This is how this split bush works. So you can see how it needs to fit around those spring mounts, but it needs to hammer down on that bush. Cable tie now. Everything's covered in oil, which is good because you want the inside of that lubricated in the spring. The grease you rub on the outside of the spring is just to stop it squeaking against the dust shield. But you can see how the spring then rotates under those little mounting lugs. This spring, one end of it is bent up just a little, which is making it hard to get it to go under there. So I'll just prise that with a screwdriver and then twist this into place. That'll lock in place. And that'll be the second shock done. The bushes seem fine. There wasn't a huge amount of wear on them. There was a little bit. You could tell when you rotated it, there was a little bit of a tight spot, but there's no play in them or anything. So I think with that oil there lubricating things, it'll be fine. So those are the shocks in fine oily rag reconditioned condition. The dust shields are loose at the moment because they go through all of this at the top, so that clamps them all. I don't think I'm going to bother taking this off. I'm just going to clean around it, but I will clean up the bearing traces. So you can see there was grease in there, but it's a bit manky. That all needs cleaning up. The front guard will be the same as the rear area of the body. I'll just wash the outside. A bit of warm soapy water I think will be enough, and clean the inside, just scrub all the mud out of it. I'll see what condition it's in. I may spray it with some underseal or something like that, just to give it a bit of protection where it's going to get wet. Same with sort of up under here. I might treat that rust. I haven't found that missing ball bearing, and it's going to be interesting reassembling that. Although when I disassembled it, I had the wheel and everything on here, so it was really heavy. I think it'll be much easier to clean the body, reassemble this to this without all the extra weight. But I have to remember to weld up that crack, I think. Clean up the inside, hammer that flat, and just a spot of weld in there, and maybe on the end of the crack. This is the bit that's missing on the other body I've got, so I should probably take a template of that while I've got it there to look at. The other thing I did was cleaned up the front brake mechanism. That's this, and the reason the front brake lever felt so limp was because the springs were completely knackered. The ends were all bent. There was hardly any spring tension on them. Luckily I had new springs, so I fitted those much tighter. It was actually a bit of a struggle to fit this, to get the springs apart far enough to fit it over. But that's all ready to go. Again, somebody has relined these, and these look new, but they'd left their little distance pieces in the end here, and I believe those only go in when these are getting worn down. So I left those out, and I tested it inside the hub, and those are going to stop fine. And I think I mentioned I'll need to make a tool. I think I've got some high tensile steel big enough, but I'll make a little tool to undo those that sort of lock nut thing in there that holds the bearings in, and everything's a big mess again. One other small job, I took apart and cleaned the ammeter. The reason it was sticking is because the coil inside there the needle was rubbing against the coil, so it would move in one direction and get stuck. Unless it had a decent swing in the other direction. You can sort of see it in there. I did have to bend the needle a little bit to get it pointing to 0. I've tried it on my bench supply. It seems reasonably accurate. The funny thing is, when if I use a rectifier regulator in it, this will probably never really show that much current, ideally, which means it's working. And these are the bearings for the steering. I am missing one. It may not have been in there because I've looked everywhere and they didn't roll too far away. They were all in one place. So I think possibly there was one that just was never there. I need to make the tool to get the locking nut out of there and clean the inside. Cleaning things is a bit of a problem at the moment because I don't want to use too much water because we haven't had any rain, so we're running low. But the water I have in this little tank is from the dehumidifier, so it's kind of free water. Not really free because I'm paying for the power, but it's readily available. This place is a real mess again to clean up. But I made my little tool to get the lock nut off the inside of the hub. I thought this was high tensile steel, but it turns out it's not. It's mild steel. So the tool's already getting mangled and I've only used it twice. But it did work. I was able to get that's the little locking ring there. These often seem to be mangled because people don't use the right tool. This one was no exception, but I've been able to file it, clean it up a little bit once I got it out. Original bearings, proper made in England Hoffman bearings, and I find the best thing to clean all the old grease out of there is just petrol. You can see that's petrol with grease in it now. I've repacked those with high temperature bearing grease. That's all been cleaned up. The wheel itself I probably need to degrease and scrub. That's why it's sitting in the parts washer. I'll do the same as the back wheel, just do the best I can with sort of red scotch, not go too mad, just get them clean. And the inside of the guard, this is just a bucket of soapy water with a little bit of degreaser in it. And I was considering spraying the inside with some sort of rubberized coating, but I've decided not to because this is the original paint and I don't want to cover that. So you can see the difference between the side I've cleaned and the side I haven't cleaned. Basically all I'm going to do is get all the mud and dirt off it and we'll coat the inside with Penetrol or something like that, and that should be enough. I may put a little bit of extra down in that middle seam that needs a bit more scrubbing. The outside again will just have a sort of gentle clean. And I did have another go at starting the engine this morning. Started first pop, no problem at all with a little bit of choke. So I think that's looking good. I've ordered an O-ring kit so I can replace the seal between the carb and the inlet pipe. I've got some little hose clamps to use on the exhaust. I've put those in place. I did get some rubber hose to use for the breather. On the earlier bikes with the different carb, there's actually a connection point where you can take the breather hose to. The later bikes with these 363 carbs don't have that, so I'm not sure exactly where this is supposed to go. For now, I've just routed it up into this axle tube. So because that goes straight into the crankcase through a sort of little maze thing, I think you want quite a long piece of tube so it's not sucking stuff into the engine, because the movement to air in this is going to be backwards and forwards. If it's long enough, you won't get any gunk up there. That's what I'm hoping. But I'll leave that clear tube on there because it's only air going through there, hopefully, because then I can see if there's anything coming out, oil or anything like that. I suspect you'd see oil mist in there eventually. And yeah, the body, I think it'll be the same. I think that's original paint under there. I just need to clean all the muck off it. do the handlebars. Front shocks are ready to go, front brakes are ready to go. This is the little tax disc thing with a whole bunch of warrant fitness stickers in there. 2006. I'm guessing the bike needed a warrant every 6 months, the same as old cars, but they're looking at changing that now. They're doing consultation on that at the moment, so there's a survey you can go and fill in and say whether or not you think it's a good idea to go to yearly warrants for cars over 40 years old. It's a bit strange the way they do the warrant system. They changed the rules, and I think it was 2000, and any car after 2000 only needs a yearly warrant unless it's brand new, in which case it only needs a warrant after the first 3 years apparently. So it'll be really interesting when I get the Riley on the road, because I'm pretty sure that means it'll effectively be registered as a new car, even though it's all 1930s technology, which means I won't need a warrant of fitness for the first 3 years. So we'll see how that works. I'm going to go ahead with cleaning this guard and maybe the wheel, and then I'm going to have a massive clean up in here. I used the mill to machine this. The coolant works really well. That's probably the best modification I've done to the mill, maybe with the exception of the DRO. It makes the cutting so much nicer, and I think that's what the machine was missing. That's one of the reasons I always struggled. Just finishing up for the day. I'd quite like to get the tyre on that rim. It's been sitting out in the sun to dry after I cleaned it. If we have a look, you can see it's come up much the same as the rear one. There's a bit of pitting and dirt and grime and stuff still on it, but it actually came up pretty well. I've sprayed some lanolin inside the actual rolled over edges. These are the original Dunlop wheels. The only problem is I have taken the bearings out, obviously, so I clean those. They've been repacked. I think I mentioned that. It's missing one of the dust covers. So there's these two metal washers. They're not flat though. They've got a particular shape to them, and they basically, because these are open bearings, they go like that, one either side, and I'm missing one. I could steal one from the other bike wheels. I prefer not to. This is why I had to use that little tool twice, because I was looking at my spare wheel to see if it had ones I could steal, but it doesn't have any. So I think I'll have to make something. It's just thin steel, so that shouldn't be too hard. And I just need to sort of press that kind of dimple thing into it. So I'll get to that. I can assemble most of it though. I was able to test the clutch. I started this up again. It starts really easily now. Like not quite first pull, but second or third if you give it the right amount of throttle. And using this, which is a brake spring puller, I was able to hook it onto the clutch lever and pull the clutch in like that. And yes, all the gears work, which is good. So I wasn't too worried about that. I was pretty sure they were going to be fine. There's not much to it. Body still hasn't been cleaned. That'll be the next thing. The wheel's been cleaned. Front guard's been cleaned. See where the paint's come off, and there's a bit of rust and stuff in there, so that'll need treating. Cleaned up the handlebars. I took the mirror off before I did that. It's kind of interesting, the cleaning has left it a little bit dull, but I think once I oil or wax it or whatever I do, it'll come back. I don't want it shiny obviously, but you can see the difference in finish almost. And I know somebody will say I've taken too much of the dirt off and it's lost its character. I don't think so. It's still got all its scrapes and dings and things, and it'll get dirty again. Dirt can always reaccumulate. I hadn't noticed this before. I don't know how I didn't notice, but this has all been welded up in the past, so I'm just going to leave that how it is. It's been gas welded, I think. I did have a look for my ball bearings, and I've got 3/16 and I've got the next size up. I can't remember what it is, but not 1/4 inch. So I'm going to have to order some just for one ball bearing, which is a bit annoying. I suspect you could put it together without one, and I suspect it didn't have one. I think one was actually missing, because I looked everywhere, especially before I vacuumed. I had a really good look around and I couldn't find it. I suppose I should check inside the vacuum. But I think this tool will last long enough for me to get the locking ring back in place. You can see how the lug's already bent. On that front wheel I actually ended up having to use a bit of heat to get it to come undone in the end. It just wasn't playing with the tool alone. What else? A few other little bits and pieces to clean up. I will need to order new brake and clutch cables, because I just could not get them to release from the levers. The way they fit in, there's the little sort of pivoting thing. It's got a little slot and the cable fits into that slot. So I still need to clean these, and of course you can see the remains of the cable there. I can't get that out. That's sort of jammed in there, so it needs a good clean, or there must be a way to get that to come out. I don't know if somebody's crushed that in to keep it in there or something, but you can see the little shoulder bolt there that these pivot on. The other one's in the handlebars, and that'll be where the wear is. So you can see that's worn out. So the thing to do will be, I could actually just weld that up and re-drill the hole. If I MIG weld it, the MIG welds are nice and hard, so it'll give it a hard wearing surface. Or I could drill it out and fit a little brass bush, something like that. I think that's what I did on the other one. I think I might do that rather than welding it, because that's always fixable, I guess. Even if you weld it, it's fixable. But, and I think we've mentioned there's the old wiring loom. So I'm almost ready to do my order of parts from the UK. But, yeah, really pleased that the gears worked. I might give this all another oil. Oil or wax or something, or penetrol, just to stop everything rusting. But, I think it'll look good, and it won't have lost. It will have lost its filth, but it won't have lost its character. Hopefully, the dirt just makes it so annoying to work on. The other thing I did was this morning I measured the ignition coils. I'm not exactly sure how you measure them. They are kind of working. If you measure the high tension coil on one, you get nothing, and if you measure it on the other, you get about 30 meg, I think. But that's just measuring it with a normal digital meter. I'm not sure if that's good enough. I did toy with putting these back and seeing how well that would work with new high tension leads, but reading on the forums, these are known to be a weak point, because they're 70 years old now, and it's you know, the windings and the insulation isn't as good as what we've got. So a lot of people experience trouble with them. Even if they work, you get all sorts of erratic behavior when they heat up and at high revs and things like that. So I'm going to keep them. I'm not going to throw them out, but I'm going to stick with the 12 volt one, and because that's what I've got there, and that saves me 300 odd New Zealand dollars buying another set of coils. Might as well use what I've got. And again, that's the only change really. So if anyone ever wants to put it back to 6 volts, you change the coils, change the battery, change the bulbs, and off you go. The rest of it all just works exactly the same. So I think I'm going to get this back into the hub, because I can make one of those and get that in last. and then put the tyre on. I think it's probably better to put that in first. Doesn't matter. I could do it either way around. I don't think it'll matter. So yeah, I think I'll get the tyre on first because I want to keep this out so I can make one of those. I've made up an approximation of one of these washers. It just kind of needs a little step in it because I think it's because the inside of the bearing is slightly higher than the outside. It's something like that. If you put one in flat, it doesn't sit against both edges. So it goes with the bearing where my hand is on that way. So I just, on the lathe, cut a piece of steel, made the disc about the right size, and I just went through my scrap bin and found random bits and pieces that kind of worked to let me press the right sort of shapes into it. So I did that on the press, just used the washer, press that down, and then kind of pressed it the other way to get it to flatten out again, because that would curve it that way, and then you sort of press it down the other way and it sort of flattens out, but it gives you the little step you need, more or less. When I do it all up tight, it'll pull it all to where it needs to be anyway, just needs to clear. So I should be able to put the bearings back in the wheel now. And this is how you actually use that little tool. Put it in the vise, that's why it's got two flats milled on it. And then you use the wheel, turn the wheel to get it tight. It's worth noting that when I took this apart, that locking ring was upside down. It's got a machined out recess which needs to go on facing the inside of the hub, which makes sense because that little washer has the step kind of like that. So you want the ring of that lock nut to be on the outside of that washer. Got the bearings back in. I may need to tighten that nut. I'm not sure if that's going, this little cover is going all the way home. It's quite tight. It rotates with the bearings. I think that's it. I think this is just, this cover's been bent in a little bit. So that goes on there. And then, I've just noticed my washer's all mangled. That's probably what's gone wrong. This piece goes in here, and I did have to ream the middle of that out and also just touch up the edge just so it'd fit over the brake thing. But I'm going to have to take that apart again. It looks like the washer's moved. Should be able to flatten it out, but yeah, that's a little bit annoying. That'll be why that end piece isn't going all the way home. I got there in the end. I did end up stealing one of the washers off one of the other wheels, only because now I know I can actually make them. It goes on there. So I can make one later on. I just want to get this one done. The other problem I had was the shaft that the bearings are on actually has it's not just a plain shaft, it's got a shoulder piece. And one bearing goes in on one end up to that shoulder. And then there's a big spacer, and then the other bearing goes on the other end. And that had shifted inside the bearings. So even with everything done up, I couldn't get it all done up properly. But that's done now. I won't reassemble that until I get the front reassembled and the front forks are on. The other thing that was confusing was the parts book views it from this direction, which is looking from the front of the bike, so that the brakes are on the left. And for some reason in my head, I always think of it the other way around. I think of it from the point of view of being on the bike, So the assembly would be, the brakes are on the right. So I had to kind of flip the drawing around until I could be absolutely certain I had everything the right way around. It'll only really fit one way around anyway. But everything's mostly tidied up. I put all the pieces I used to make that washer in a little bag. So I've got all the random bits of pipe and washers and bits and pieces I use there. I'll make up another one sometime. There's no rush. Actually, if I'm ordering parts from the UK, they probably have those, and they're probably cheap. So it makes sense just to order some of them. So what's left? Clean up the body, and I can actually start reassembling things. To actually get it finished and going, I need to redo the wiring, of course, and cables, clutch cable and clutch, throttle and brake. Although in a pinch I could use that throttle cable because that seems to be working pretty well. It's just the ends of it are a bit manky. But let's goes that way up. I'm guessing once it's all bolted up it should be okay.